Hello everyone, thanks for checking out another one of my games. This week was a little bit of preparation for a tournament that I'll be attending next Saturday, so just over a week from now. As I touched on a little bit at the start of the battle report, I was hoping to play orcs in that tournament, not because I think that my orc list is better than my Tau list, that's actually not the case, but just because I thought that would be pretty fun to play, and the list that I came up with is pretty different from most lists that I've seen, as well as the list that I usually play, the Green Tide list. So I'll go into that a little bit. What I've been workshopping is using Gargantuan Squiggoths as transports for tank bustas with orcs. So if you're not familiar with those, tank bustas are strength 8, AP minus 2, 3 damage, hit on 5's base, and then they reroll all misses against anything with the vehicle keyword. And then a Gargantuan Squiggoth can carry 20 guys in it and is not only open topped, but the guys can shoot out of it, even if it's in combat, as long as they don't shoot at the things that the Squiggoth is in combat with. So I got that idea, and I wrote a blog post about it from some of the lists at the Bay Area Open that happened last week or 2 weeks ago, something like that, put on by the ITC guys. The orc players who did well brought one Gargantuan Squiggoth in their list. I didn't think their lists were very good, but the Gargantuan Squiggoth is a good little tech choice that I think I'm going to make use of. But instead of running one, I want to run two, because I want to run an army that's like toughness 8 spam, and I also want to run 40 tank bustas, because I think that's really good in the meta right now. So that's the list I'm shopping right now, is 2 Gargantuan Squiggoths, 40 tank bustas, 1 big mech on a warbike with a custom force field, 1 kill tank, which is a Forge World like Land Raider size tank that basically has good anti-infantry guns on it, and then it's also a transport, and I was going to put 6 Burna Boys in that, and that's the whole list. It's a Lord of War detachment, because I have 3 Lords of War, and then 1 Spearhead detachment, because I have a ton of heavy supports. So I just don't have the models to play that right now. I was hoping to proxy it today. I did order a Baneblade online, which I'm going to convert into counting as a Gargantuan Squiggoth, and then I'll probably get another Baneblade at some point and do the same thing, and then I'm going to convert a battle wagon that I have laying around into a kill tank, so I should be able to get the army together eventually, at least those models, which makes it a lot easier to proxy, and then I can see if I like it or not. Some people are saying that the footprint is of all 3 of those things is not going to be covered by 1 custom force field. When I did the math on it, it seemed like it would be, as long as they bunched up together very tightly. But when I get the Baneblade this week, I can just put it on a table and measure it and make sure that it will or won't. So if it won't, I'll have to retool the list a little bit. But if it will, then that's a list that I'm definitely hoping to play at a different tournament, which is at the end of my league, which is at the end of August, so this month. But for right now, I'm just getting reps in with my Tau, because that's the army that I have fully built. They're almost fully WYSIWYG. I'm getting some bits to turn the gun drones I have into shield drones, and then I need to get some plasma guns to change one of my I'm probably gonna. I have 1 battlesuit commander, the actual model, and I usually use him as my warlord because he's more. It's easier to see him because the other guys I use are just normal crisis suits. But he has fusion blasters, and I don't feel like popping them all off really. So I'm just gonna leave him with the fusion blasters, and I'll either buy another commander or just use one of my other crisis suits as another regular commander with cyclic ion blasters. So. Those are pretty much the only changes I have to make to the army, and those are very easy to do within a week. Like I said, I already have all that stuff on hand. I just need to get it done. Going to the game, I felt very good about my list going in. Unfortunately, I did not play with one of my units of Pathfinders, which is the same thing. I made the same mistake in the game I played right afterwards because I didn't have my list on me, which I'll definitely fix in the future. But I put a lot of thoughts into that particular Tau army. Obviously, people are going to be like, herp derp. Obviously, commanders are good. obviously, if you put the right guns on them, they're just going to beat a lot of people. But I think there's a lot of ways to go with the commander spam lists, like depending on how many guys you take, if you want them all to deep strike or not, things like that. And I think my version is probably the best version of it. The advice I was getting from a lot of Tau players was you have to take fusion blasters on like 1 to 2 commanders. I think that's extremely bad advice. The commanders with fusion blasters are good if you're running a more mixed arms Tau army. So if you have like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, kind of everything, then the commanders are really good for that because you can put 4 fusion guns on them. They hit on 2s. They can deep strike. They're just really good at helping you deal with armor. But I have 10 guys who can overcharge to strength 8, AP -2, D3 damage. Like, I don't have any problems dealing with tanks or monsters. I just need more. And the reason I don't want the fusion blasters is because against like infantry and stuff, they're one shot, whereas the cyclic ion blasters, if you don't overcharge them, are 3 shots, and if you do overcharge them, they're D3 shots. So they are much better at dealing with like hordes, infantry, stuff like that. And I think that's what I need to gear the army more towards. So I kind of, through playtesting and working on the list, just figured out that that's bad advice for the particular build that I'm going for. So I just went with all cyclic ion blasters. I don't think there's any other gun that's really worth using in a commander spam army. Burst cannons are purely anti-infantry, and they're fine at it, but they're not great at it. Missile pods are extremely overpriced, and toughness 7 is not what you want to be at when you're going against vehicles or monsters. Unless a gun has at least a strength 8, I don't consider it viable as like an anti-tank gun, unless it has a crazy volume of shots or something. Like wounding on 4s against vehicles just feels terrible. Like you have to be able to wound on 3s to get through, in my experience. So that's kind of my reasoning with that. I did try missile pods the very first time I played the army, and it did work, but there was a lot of weird things going on in that game. So like when I sat down and reflected on it and started doing the math and things like that, I was like, wow, missile pods are kind of bad, and they're kind of expensive, so I'm not going to take these anymore. And then like the plasma rifles are almost completely useless. Like with the stat line that they have, they seem like they're supposed to be good at killing Marines, but you would just always take cyclic ion blasters for that. So hopefully that gets retooled a little bit when the Tau book eventually comes out, because right now they're useless. Same with like the air bursting fragmentation launcher. It's just like a bad gun. I don't know why you would ever take it. A burst cannon is just like better in almost 100% of situations. So yeah, some of the Tau commander options are a little funky. I also moved the list to being more of it has a lot more infantry in it than I originally planned on. Originally I was just using like Cadre Fireblades for a couple really accurate marker light shots, but then as I was playing, I found out that wasn't giving me like the coverage I needed. Usually I need at least 1 marker light hit on 2 to 4, maybe even 5 targets, and the Fireblades were only giving me it on 2 targets. They were really accurate, but they didn't have the number of shots that I needed to keep up with the army, because the commanders kill stuff really fast. Like they blow through units very quickly. So if you have more marker light coverage, you can do more overcharges, which is good against like mechanized armies or monster mash or something like that. So I eventually just kind of cut them and put in more like pathfinders and stuff. That also lets me not run a bunch of Supreme Command attachments. There's been some rumblings that Supreme Command attachments might get looked at as you can't take more than 1 of these. Same thing with a couple of the other detachments, like the Air Wing one, stuff like that, just because it leads to some of the more abusive armies that you can make. Like right now you can play crazy smite spam armies if you just use Supreme Command attachments and like cheap like Heralds of Tzeentch or the Renegades and Heretics characters, or like the Imperial Guard Psychers. Like you can run a ton of smites and you can't get to them because your opponent has a bunch of chaff units in the way. So that's just like kind of a thing that might get looked at. Now I kind of wanted to pre-plan my list to play around that, and also it makes it slightly less cheesy. It's still a very, very cheesy, very competitive list, but it softens that edge a little bit. I think the list that I played against is really interesting. I thought it was a lot better before I found out that the Pox Riders could not get the -2 to be hit, because that really makes them powerful. Like they don't hit particularly hard, but they were just like very difficult to kill because even if you hit them on threes, like that's a very average hit for a Marine. Now you're hitting them on fives, and then you're probably wounding them on fours or fives, and then they have a bunch of wounds and they can heal and they have disgustingly resilient and stuff. So it was just like they're not eating through you at the speed of light, but it's really hard to remove these guys. Now obviously even if that was the case, you could like dispel the ability so that they only get a -1 to be shot, and then as you kill them they kind of lose the other ability that they have. But the fact that they start off so strong, like from turn 1 where you're probably not in range to deny the power, and you can't kill any of them yet because the game just began, it's difficult to then start eating away at them when from the word go they have a -2 to hit against everything in your army in every phase. So that was kind of the powerful element of the list. And I actually had a conversation with Nick, the guy I played on Facebook, just letting him know that like, hey, this doesn't work. He thought it did because there's a portion in the Imperial Armor FAQ where if you have such and such ability, you can take the Death Guard keyword, but as I pointed out, that's only if you have the Legion keyword in brackets, so you get to pick a Legion to be from, and that unit does not have that, so they can't get Death Guard, thus they cannot be affected by that psychic power. So I think that unit is decidedly okay. They can still do a lot of the other cool support elements, like they work well with Demon Princes, who you want to take anyways because Demon Princes are really, really good from Chaos. They work well with 1 Herald. I don't think having 2 is a good idea. They're a little flimsy and they don't really add much. Like I like them as just kind of like a smite bot and following the Pox Riders around to give them +1 strength, although they do kind of have that issue where the Pox Riders are faster than them and are usually going to be charging things, so it can be a little difficult to keep them within 6 inches for the +1 strength, but I think it's still viable. Other armies make it work, so I think it can be done. You just might have to like blow a command point to reroll the advance roll every once in a while or something like that, or leave a guy out of combat to daisy chain back, something like that. And that still makes the unit pretty good at killing not really hard targets, but like things that don't have great saves and a lot of wounds, or things that have like average saves, because they're only AP -1, and then the Riders are AP nothing, and they do D3 damage, but they put out a pretty good volume of attacks with a good strength. If you have the Herald, the problem is they hit on 4s, so you also need them to be near a Demon Prince, although that's not very difficult to engineer because the Demon Princes can keep up with them easily and is also going to be charging stuff, and you only need like 1 guy to be within 6 inches of him, so that's very easy to make happen. And then they're kind of just a good like tar pit unit. They can fly, so they can get over screens in some situations. They can get over around terrain if they need to, stuff like that. I don't know their points cost off the top of my head because I didn't actually point out the list that I played against. I usually do that when I do battle reports, but I mean, unless they're like really expensive, I think they're good not to build an army around, but to have as like a very useful element. The Decimators with the 2 Soul Burner guns is kind of a popular build going around right now. One guy in my local area plays 4 of them with Abaddon, so they get to reroll all misses, so they're hitting on 3s normally, or 4s if they run, and then they're rerolling all misses, doing 4d3? Yeah, 4d3 shots, each turning into a mortal wound if it hits. I think those guys are really hit and miss. They're not good in combat because you have to lose both of the arms to get the Soul Burner gun. And then they're just standard dreadnoughts, except they have an invulnerable save and they heal 1 wound, which almost never comes up. Like it'll help them if they take a damage from their own gun, but if anybody wants a dreadnought dead, it's just gonna die. It's only 8 wounds, toughness 7. Like it's not that difficult to remove. So I think they're really good against more elite armies, or if your opponent has something where shooting mortal wounds at it is really good. But if they don't, they're really bad. Like they do nothing. I mean, this game, one did nothing because of how the game went, and then the other one killed a unit of Fire Warriors and then died. But like, I didn't have anything else for it to shoot. I mean, what's it gonna do? Shoot a commander? It can't because it's a character, and I'm gonna block it off all the time. If it shoots into a unit of drones, at best it's going to kill 4 of them by splitting its shots, but if it's shield drones, they have feel no pain, so there might be some variance in there. They only get an average of 2d3s, 4 shots hitting on 3s. That's like 2 and something, and then so yeah, I mean it's not the greatest odds that he'll just nuke them all, and then he can't contribute any other way. Like if he goes and ties something up, he is also tied up, and then he can't fight, and he has to kind of play a mid-range game, which means he's at risk of being charged by something that can fight and just tear him apart. So I think they're fine. Like I would take probably 1, but they're a little over-exaggerated as far as like, oh my god, the Chaos can just put out all these ranged mortal wounds. Like, what am I gonna do? I mean, sure, it sucks if you play Marines, but if you play anything else, they're gonna not be that scary. Like if you play any kind of Horde army or anything like that. And then yeah, like just I don't think Necrosius is any good. Like he's good with Poxwalkers, but he's not good in this list. I mean, I would rather just he be a Chaos Sorcerer or a Chaos Lord or something. A Lord would probably be better because this list has so many plasma guns that reroll 1s to hit would be very helpful for when the guys want to overcharge. I felt like there was a lot of times that the Plague Marines should have been able to overcharge, but Nick was like afraid to because then they most likely die. Rerolling 1s to hit when you overcharge, and then also having Disgustingly Resilient makes the Plague Marine Plasma really reliable as far as not killing off your own dudes. And then you have like a fighty Lord or something. Necrosius is decently fighty, but he doesn't buff anybody else. He has psychic powers, but he doesn't use them most of the time. Like there were so many psychic powers in this list that it was difficult for him not to like step on the feet of his other psychers. And then not like some of them are situational, like the healing one you only cast sometimes. Like Plague Wind or whatever it's called, where you do mortal wounds on 6s and you roll as many dice as are in the unit. Situational. Some of them require like line of sight and stuff like that. So I would prefer like less psychers but more focused. Like drop a Herald, drop the Plague Caster, or drop Necrosius. Better off keep the Plague Caster and turn Necrosius into a Lord and do something else with the other points. And I think that would like get a better list overall. This list also doesn't have any kind of like chaff or anything like that, which is something I keep seeing Marine players like not adapt to. Like I don't know what the mindset is, but Marine players just will not accept that they have to have some throwaway units in their army. They're like, no, I'm going to take all Marines. It's going to be awesome. Like take Scouts, take Conscripts, take Cultists, take Poxwalkers, take Demons, take something that's not expensive and you could just park on an objective or like put in front of your army to get shot or charged or something like that. I mean, it just feels like these armies are so small when I play against them, and they can be in so few places at once, and it's just, I don't know, it's not working out, and I think that's really something that Marine players need to adjust to. I've been saying that over and over again, and I think it's going to be a really slow adaptation because people just want to take all the big like fancy toys when they play Marines, and they don't want to take the uninteresting units that are actually really helpful when you put an army on the tabletop and start playing a real game. As far as the game itself, I played pretty sloppy this game. I would say, yeah, pretty sloppy. I did something you should never do, which is commit to a plan and then abandon it. So the way I had deployed was somewhat committal, but I could have moved guys turn 1 or advanced or something like that and kind of reposition myself if I needed to, had I wanted to drop all my commanders on the right, which I actually did. But I was like, okay, I could drop them on the left and I'll just kill this Dreadnought and I'll kill these Plague Marines, and then like my opponent won't be able to do anything back to me because he's mostly melee. He's going to be way far out of range, stuff like that. But then I was like, I'm going to waste a lot of shooting doing this because where the Dreadnought was positioned, he was like denying a lot of table space where I could drop. So I was like, I'm going to waste a lot of shooting. I'm only going to kill these 2 things. And then, like, you know, I'm going to lose all my guys on the right because they're just going to get overwhelmed. Like, it didn't feel good. I think it would have been okay in hindsight, but in the moment I was just like, I don't think I could do this and have a viable path to victory. So I dropped on the right instead, and that denied me Markerlight support for pretty much the entire game. Some of that was my positioning, and some of that was just the abundance of characters that Nick's army had. So I mean, he had 2 Heralds, Necrosius, Plaguecaster, and 2 Demon Princes. So the Demon Princes I wanted to put Markerlights on all the time, but there was always something closer to me than them, so I couldn't do that. Part of that was because, like I said, I had poor positioning, but then part of it was he was just like putting models in the right places and stuff like that. And then I wanted to get marker lights on the Pox Riders, but it's difficult because I hit on 4's base. If I move, which is pretty often that I have to, I hit on 5's, and then with their aura, I hit on 6's, and then if they have the spell on them, which is not legal, but in that game I did not know that yet, I have to hit on 7, so I can't even hit. So at best I'm hitting on 5's or 6's, so it was a little dicey, and I made it happen like one turn, but after that I just started shooting the pulse carbines and stuff like that, which I probably shouldn't have done. There's a lot of things that I was trying to finish off. I was like, oh, the Steven Prince has 1 wound left, or like, oh, this Pox Rider has 1 wound left, or something like that. And I was like, I'll finish it off with like some Strength 5 shooting, but it just never really panned out, and that's something I need to stop relying on. Like the Fire Warriors and the Pathfinders and stuff like that they're not offensive elements in the army. They can do some work, but they are support units. They're there to hold objectives. They're there to provide me marker light hits, and then they can clean up like really low end things. Like if my opponent has like some Imperial Guard infantry, if they have little bugs, if you're playing against Tyranids. Gretchen, stuff like that, they can do more damage into, like the really low-end chaff units, and clear those out. But I mean, they're not great into like premier units, like which is pretty much all of what Nick's army was. It was like the weakest thing he has is toughness 5 Space Marines that also have a 5+ feel no pain. Like that was his weakest unit. So yeah, I just shouldn't have been relying on them to shoot this game. And done other things with them. So that was something I would definitely put as another mistake. A lot of my positioning was a little off. That's something I still struggle with Tau. I usually deploy the commanders correctly, or at least well. But then as I start moving them, I get a little sloppy with like where the drones go and stuff like that. So that's something I was trying to be conscious of this game, is like making sure I was using the drones to put in front of the commanders to deny shooting, making sure that they were like blocking charges if there was a charge that was going to come up, making sure that they were within 3 inches of as many commanders as I could for savior protocols, stuff like that. That's where I think a lot of like the invisible skill of the list comes into play. Like you don't obviously notice it unless you're really looking, but the better you do those things, the longer your commanders live. The more offense you put out, and the more brutal the army plays in terms of being able to kill stuff. So that's where I'm really trying to improve right now, is making sure that as the game goes, I'm doing a good job of keeping my commanders alive as best I can, and then making sure that I'm putting my support units in places where they can be effective, not just immediately, but as the game kind of progresses. So yeah, those are the 2 takeaways for me. I'm also still pretty impressed by how durable commanders are. Like every time I think they're gonna get just annihilated by something, they'll take damage, but they don't die. Like I had several commanders take like 4 wounds this game, take 3 wounds this game, and it hurts. But then you fall back from combat, and you usually kill what just charged you, or if you got shot, you can like answer back and kill what shot you. So they take a punch reasonably well, especially with the shield drones. The shield drones make the list so much better. Like before I was running all gun drones, because before the last FAQ, shield drones were literally useless. They had no purpose 99% of the time in any Tau army. But now with their 5+ feel no pain, you can save your protocols like a las cannon shot onto the drone, and it turns into 1 mortal wound, and then you have a 5+ feel no pain. So instead of the las cannon shot like rolling damage and then moving that damage over to the drone, you just take 1 wound, because that's how the steps work in the game. So they rolled a hit, they rolled a wound, they successfully wound before they ever get to roll damage, because there's an armor save step before that happens. I move the wound over to my drone, it doesn't multiply, and then I take 1 feel no pain save, and if I pass it, I just negated everything. I was actually playing that wrong this game. I was just not thinking about it, and I've noticed other people doing that too. Like I'm in the middle of watching a battle report while I was writing my battle report up, and the guy who's playing, he's also playing Tau, and he was taking like 5 feel no pain saves, like from meltaguns and stuff like that. You don't have to do that. It's just one save. I mean, unless I'm reading that wrong, then someone feel free to correct me. But that makes shield drones just so good, especially if your dice are rolling decently. And then they're just such a better like net than the gun drones were for the commanders. Like to remove them, they're just as vulnerable to like small arms fire, like bolters and stuff like that. But if your opponent has to start shooting like more powerful guns into them, the gun drones would just die. But these guys have a 4+ invulnerable and a 5+ feel no pain. So there's a lot of times where they were just living in the game, and it was really awesome, because that can quickly become really frustrating for your opponent. Is like they can't even get through these drones to start getting to the characters that are actually just wrecking their army. So yeah, those are really awesome changes. I don't have any big mistakes for my opponent to really discuss. I mean, he kind of played the game plan that was forced upon him. He charged what he could, rolled what he could for damage, stuff like that. I didn't have an overwhelmingly good first turn. Like I said, I just killed like some of a Marine squad, left the plasma guns around for the most part, killed one dreadnought, and then killed some of the pox riders. But I think that it's just like, whenever I play against Nurgle, I always feel like their damage output is very low. They're very resilient, but their damage output is low. Like, they're not good in combat. They're a little bit better than a regular Marine, which is not good at all. And then they're just as good at shooting as a Marine is. They could take a little bit more special weapons for smaller units, which is cool. But then if they start taking casualties, you start losing those really fast. And they're pretty expensive. So I mean, if you're like a Nurgle player out there, a Marine player, like I would kind of use this list as a showing of like what can happen when you take the shiny toys before you really like fill out the baseline of your army. It just leaves you with not able to do enough damage, and then of course Nick's list was probably more focused towards being defensive than most lists are. Like I said, the Pox Riders are just not a high damage unit, but there were so many resources being dedicated to them, and so many points and stuff like that, that like, yeah, they're really hard to kill, but they got multiple charges on me this game and didn't even kill one commander. Like they just couldn't finish anything off. Like they absorbed most of my shooting, but if you don't get anything out of that, is that really good? I mean, if I was to play against him again, I would probably ignore them. I would just kill the whole rest of the army. Like, I'd kill the Demon Princes, the Dreadnoughts, the characters, and then, once they're by themselves, the Poxwalkers don't do very much. Like, I would just be like, okay, you can charge this commander. Probably not going to kill it. Even if you do, I'll just give you one, move back, shoot you, give you one, move back, shoot you. Like, they're just, if you have a unit that's very durable but it's not a threat, your opponent can just kind of ignore it. I mean, I should have done that kind of from the go, but I didn't have experience playing against them, so I was like, oh, I really need to kill these, because them and the Demon Princes are the only thing that really threatens me, stuff like that. But I mean, as it turned out, like, the characters were doing more damage with smites, like the Plague Marines were doing more damage with just their guns and stuff. The Toads didn't do hardly anything. So, but that's probably, like a little situational thing that I learned is, at least with my Tau, that unit doesn't do too much, and I should just not worry about them. Continue to love the ITC missions. They're really, really fun. It's great to have to like move around as the game goes and like grab objectives and stuff like that. I wish that destroy a unit wasn't as prevalent. I mean, when you're rolling 3 independent results and it's 2 of the results, like, you're gonna get it as one of them a really high percentage of the time. And that's a little boring, not just because it's really good against Tau. Like, Tau are awful at kill points, obviously, with the drones, but I kind of wish destroy a unit was like 1 result, and then they had some of the other things sprinkled in that they do in some of the other missions, like have no enemy units within your deployment zone, but have 1 of your own units, or like have 3 of your units within your enemy deployment zone. More stuff like that kind of focuses on movement and less on just shooting and charging and stuff like that, because those are the things you do to like win the game anyways. Killing your opponent's army is how you generally get ahead and win the game. I would prefer that the Maelstrom objectives were maybe a little more focused on maneuverability and like thinking about the board and placement and stuff like that, because I mean, I'm already trying to kill my opponent's models. I don't need to be excessively rewarded for that. But it's certainly much better than like the basic rulebook missions are, and those kind of things. As I also touched on at the start of the battle report, I played another game immediately after this one, which was my league match for the week against someone I never played. I believe his name was Steven. He had World Eaters and Dark Angels. Originally, I was going to play Orcs in this game, but it was getting a little bit later in the day, and I remember that this week we went to 2,000 points in the league, so I was like, oh, I'll play my Tau instead because I can get some tournament practice with them. And he played Dark Angels because he thought they would be like a better matchup into what I was bringing. I brought the same list. I again forgot to deploy one of the units of Pathfinders, so I was handicapping myself. He had a Dark Shroud, 3 land speeders with multi-meltas and Typhoon missile launchers. The bigger land speeder, I don't remember what it's called, but it had like a big plasma cannon on it or something like that, and then an assault cannon. He had 5 Black Knights, the bikers with the plasma guns. And I think they had like Corvus hammers or something. He mentioned Corvus hammers, but I don't remember what they had for melee stuff. He had a biker librarian, a biker apothecary, and a biker ancient. The librarian had an axe, and the other 2 had Corvus hammers. He had Samael on his little like bike that like flies around. I don't know exactly what it's referred to in the game. And then he had the Nephilim flyer, the one with the hurricane bolters and the rift cannon, and 7 assault marines, 2 with flamers, and 1 power fist. And then if I didn't say he had a dark shroud, he had a dark shroud, just 1 dark shroud. We played the same mission that I did in the game against Nick, Big Guns Never Tire, for the ITC variant. And this game was completely brutal. So he moved everything up turn 1. Everything was pretty bunched together except for the Nephilim, who like went off and killed a bunch of my infantry because it has hurricane bolters and stuff like that. But he wasn't able to kill anything except for like 1 unit of fire warriors and a couple drones, and then 1 unit of crude hounds. I hit everything else pretty effectively, and then I dropped all my commanders in like a crescent around all of his bikes and stuff like that. This was on turn 1. I got a marker light onto the Dark Shroud and onto the bikes, needing 6s, but I had like a lot of Pathfinders shoot them and stuff, so I just rolled it. And then I killed the Dark Shroud, all 5 bikers, Samael, 1 land speeder, and put 3 wounds on another land speeder in 1 turn. I killed like half his army. It was completely like the game was decided right then and there. I was like, wow. The army, like, hyper elite armies just cannot beat this Tau list that I play. Like, there's no way that anything with it, like, you're paying a bunch of points for and has like wounds and stuff like that, it's just gonna melt under the guns that I'm bringing, and that's exactly what happened. Like, I was rolling awful for my my damage dice on the bikes, like, because they die if you roll a 2 or a 3. I was rolling like tons of 1s, so it was just eating up like 2 damage rolls instead of 1, and I still just like burned through them like it was nobody's business. And then like on turn 2, he charged 1 commander with the characters, brought the assault marines in, they failed their charge, shot with some of the land speeders, like killed 4 drones and wounded a commander. That was it. And he killed some more infantry with the flyer. Like, the flyer was the only thing doing work because it was able to move around and like shoot my little infantry guys. And then on turn 2, I killed the flyer, all 3 of the characters, all the assault marines, and that was it. Yeah, so all he had left was 2 land speeders, one of which was damaged, and then the big land speeder. And then he like backed everything off into the corner. I called the ability where you can move and advance, or advance and shoot without penalty, and then I was able to blow up the other 2 land speeders on turn 3 and leave him with just the big land speeder, and then at that point he called it. But like, yeah, that game was just not worth doing a battle report for because it was over on my turn 1. I was like, there's no way he can possibly come back. Like, he can't. There's no situation where he can even kill these commanders with what he has left before the game ends. Like, even if I do nothing for the rest of the game. So that's again another instance where these hyper elite Space Marine armies, like, they look cool and I think they appeal to like the fantasy that people have for Space Marines. But if you're trying to be competitive or like win or something like that, you just can't play with so few models. You can't play like these all biker armies or like take a bunch of vehicles and stuff like that. I mean, unless you're doing extreme force manipulation, like if he'd had like Azrael on top of that to give them all invulnerable saves, and then like reroll hits or something, and then dropped some of the other elements because obviously you have to pay for Azrael, something like that. Then he could have gotten a little more mileage out of it. But to make those super elite builds work, you have to do extreme force manipulation. That's like why Gilliman is so popular and why people play Ultramarines, is because it turns out if you give pretty much your entire army reroll to hits and reroll to wound, you can get a lot of work out of very few guys with an expensive character backing them up. So that's what you have to either go super elite with a ton of buffs, or you need to kind of bite the bullet and be like, okay, maybe I need some scouts or like some conscripts or something like even basic tactical squads. I don't know, to like fill out this army and give me some bodies and stuff like that. But yeah, that was that game. He was a good sport about it. Once I started shooting him, he kind of realized that the writing was on the wall. He didn't realize that all of my guys were commanders, even though we went over our list before the game started, and I told him that, but I think he said he never played against Tau before, so he didn't realize that they hit on twos and all that kind of stuff. And like I killed the Dark Shroud with one commander, like just one commander with marker lights killed the Dark Shroud. It was I couldn't believe how like papery it was. It only has 9 wounds. But yeah, that was once I saw his list, I was like, okay, this is going to be over really fast. But yeah, so that's kind of like the mini battle report for that one. There wasn't too much cool stuff going on. Like the best part of the game was when I left the Nephilim flyer on 1 wound and charged it with 3 commanders, killed it, and then it blew up and like killed some drones and did some damage to them and stuff. But like that was really that's probably some of the most offense that he did in that game. I mean, even when 3 characters charged a commander, I think they did like 3 wounds to it. It was just like nothing. But yeah, I mean, not to discourage anybody who plays Dark Angels out there, I actually think Dark Angels are probably the best Space Marine variant, except for Ultramarines, just because Azrael is so broken, and the Dark Shroud is pretty broken when you combine him with Azrael, and like they can just layer a stupid amount of buffs. But yeah, either take those things or don't take such an elite army. So most of my reports for the upcoming week are probably going to be with Tau. Like I said, I'm preparing for a tournament, and then once I'm able to get a hold of the stuff that I want to use for my Orc army, then I will start experimenting with that and seeing if we can make something happen with that. So thanks again for checking my video out. I might make another video just kind of going into some of my thoughts about that Orc list that I talked about, because I know people like hearing about orcs, and then that can maybe open up a discussion or something. I think that's something better. That would be something that would be better spoken than written down, just because I don't know, I feel like making another video. So yeah, be on the lookout for that, and thanks for checking this one, and see you again next time.